Or I guess I could get started when you pull that up. Yes. So welcome, everyone. I am using the mic because we're actually recording this session as well. But for those of you who did make it here, we're really glad to be here. I'm Anna Olsen. I'm Assistant Vice Provost of the Center for Faculty Excellence, one of the co-sponsors of this event. We are very excited to have 4 presenters here with us today. So I'm going to start actually by introducing our guests from outside of AU. So Julie Taylor, who's Director of Academic Relations for Fulbright at the Institute of International Education, IIE, and her colleague Amy Marion, who is Outreach and Recruitment Specialist at IIE. So welcome. I'll go ahead and give the microphone to you.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming. In fact, Amy and I both used to work at AU, so it's been a nice homecoming for us. We used to work in the School of International Service. And today we're talking about U.S. Scholar Awards. So the Fulbright program, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what it looks like, is there's sort of 4 sides to the program. There's what we call the outbound programs, of which this is one of them, that sends U.S. scholars abroad. Then we have the U.S. student program, which sends U.S. students abroad. And we have the foreign student program, which brings students, you have many here at your campus, usually for graduate studies at the master's degree level, sometimes for the PhD level. And then the visiting scholar program, which brings visiting scholars for research at U.S. institutions. And then we have a smattering of other programs that we'll also talk about that can be useful for you for bringing people from abroad to AU. So let me get started with this. The Fulbright program was created right after World War II by Congress. And the original funding for the program was actually the sale of armaments in the European theater. So it was literally a swords to plowshare story. And after that, then it was funded by the U.S. Congress. So we just went through the appropriations process recently. So if you have questions about whether, Fulbright is still standing, well, we're here. And we were recently funded. So at essentially the same level as before. So you hear a lot of stories about Fulbright, but as you do with many other agencies, but it sort of followed the same process as what's happened previously, which is there may be suggested cutbacks to the program, but Congress really sees Fulbright as its program. It is a flagship international exchange program. And so then they end up putting a lot of the funding back. So fortunately, we have that type of bipartisan support in Congress. It's sponsored by the U.S. Department of State and their Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs. And then it's implemented by different agencies. So we're with the nonprofit Institute for International Education. We implement the 4 programs that 4 sides of the program that I just spoke about, except for there's different programs, like some of the scholars who are coming from the Middle East are handled by another agency. There's a program called Fulbright Specialist that we don't run. It's run by World Learning. You go for shorter periods of time, and that's run by a different implementing agency. But that's why you're hearing about us coming from IIE. You might kind of wonder, what do they have to do about this? And that's because we implement the program on behalf of the State Department. So the program supports research, teaching, and professional and artistic projects in about 130 countries. And the awards are merit-based and selected through a multi-step review process, including peer review here in the United States. So people from your own discipline, essentially. And then final approval by the Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board. Actually, I skipped this spot. So it's peer review in the United States. Then you go on to host country review. And then there's FFSB, this appointed board, and makes the final decisions. So there's 3 key things about Fulbright that make us very distinctive from other programs that you might apply for. And one is just the unmatched scale of Fulbright. So we're providing close to 800 fellowships a year, which comes to between 7 and 800. So, which makes us the largest fellowship program for faculty. So we have, we'll probably mention, 380 or so unique awards that are in what I'll refer to as the catalog of our awards, which is a web page that's searchable. And so we've got 380 of those awards, and then some of them we have multiples of. So that's how you get to the 800 awards that we provide per year. And so it's very big. And then there's the mission of connection. So when you're applying for an NIH award or an NSF grant or other grants, they're really focused on the viability of your project. And Fulbright's very interested in that too. Like when your application goes to peer review, they're essentially checking it for like, are you going to be able to conduct this project? But then there's our mission, which you also need to be addressing, which is to create long-standing connections. So that's something that you need to speak to in the application that makes it a little bit different than other applications. So we want to find out what you're going to be doing in country, but then we also want to find out how you plan on benefiting from that in the long term, how it might benefit your institution or your local community. So that's what the reviewers end up calling the Fulbrightiness of the application, is how much it connects to mission. And then the other is just the broad range of opportunities. So we offer opportunities in every discipline. And then we offer opportunities to people at all career stages. So we have postdoc awards to, retired faculty can also receive awards. It doesn't mean that every person is able to apply for every award. So we have some awards that are exclusive to tenure line faculty. We have some awards that are open to people who don't even have a PhD. You could have a master's degree. So really reading the details of each award is very important with Fulbright. So why Fulbright? There's other factors beyond what I just mentioned, and it's that it really supports your professional development as a scholar. So you go abroad, for your project, teaching, research, combination of those, whatever it is. And then you build these partnerships, and it can lead to greater international collaboration between your institution or your laboratory, or just for you personally, that you end up co-publishing with people, which expands your publishing networks. Those publications tend to have a greater impact scores too, just because you're accessing a greater network. Another thing is that we have Fulbright commissions in 42 countries or something. We have Fulbright commissions either running the program in other countries or the U.S. Embassy, and they're very, very focused on you making connections. And so a lot of times they're facilitating you engaging their Fulbright alumni who've gone to the U.S. or to allowing you to go to another conference within the country, or there's funding for you to maybe travel regionally to a conference or to engage another campus. There's all sorts of little ways that we try to facilitate the creation of those connections. So that is something that's very different about Fulbright. You're recognized as a Fulbright Scholar. Many people have said that that has contributed to their professional growth. So they've then gone on, they've learned about opportunities or been seen as a more competitive for opportunities. And so they might, apply for some other position, move up into administration, move to be the heads of their associations. There's all sorts of different stories that we hear. And they they stay connected to this network, and forever, like throughout their career, they end up hearing about new opportunities and things that they would not have heard about otherwise if they hadn't already been a Fulbright Scholar and had that real sit and soak experience in a country. A lot of us go abroad for research, but you might just be going for a conference or for a little while. You don't end up creating those type of long-term connections that are the hallmark of Fulbright. And Fulbright supports you from application to grant. That is also a big difference. Amy will show you our awards in the catalog. On the side of each award is an IIE person who is in charge of that award, and you can attend their office hours. We have webinars where you could learn about awards in Scandinavia or awards in a certain country. We have, you can even send questions to the person for that award. Though we recommend that you attend office hours first. It's usually the most beneficial way to go. So there's support on, when you're applying, but then once you're in country, then you have a program person at IIE who is in charge of your grant. It's a fellowship, but we call it a grant at that point. And they will help you if anything comes up. Then we have the commissions and the embassies in country who also are looking after our Fulbrighters and helping them, maybe giving you information on housing, on getting the kids in school, whatever it is that you need. So, so there's a lot of support that you receive from Fulbright. And I'd say, one of the biggest resources is our alumni. So we have a Fulbright Scholar Directory. You could look for people who had awards in that country and then maybe send out emails to some of those people to see how they navigated getting their kids into school, or how was it at such and such university. You can also, and our alumni are always very willing to answer questions. The as you'll see, that the Fulbright also supports families going on the award. So, which means Fulbright is in favor of you bringing your family member, and about 60% of our awards have some form of dependent support. Now, that varies considerably. So you have to look at what you can select on dependent support when you're looking at awards to see what's available. Some of them will offer housing. The Sub-Saharan Africa Awards will offer a larger stipend as well as private school for the kids. But then other places, it might just be a plane ticket. That would be the dependent support that they're providing. So you really need to look at the fine print on each one of the awards. And a lot of the family members end up going on and having kind of greater benefits to them than even the scholar who goes. So we had our Fulbright Scholar Advisory Board chair. He went for public health. He had a great time. Of course, ended up co-publishing. His wife ended up becoming, she wasn't working at the time, and she ended up learning about Mediterranean cooking and then wrote a cookbook and became like an expert on Mediterranean cooking and had this whole other career. So we hear tons of stories about the children then going off and having international careers. So it really can be transformative for your whole family. And now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Amy Marion. Like this. Tap. All right. Hello. Hi, everybody. So as Anna and Julie mentioned, my name's Amy Marion. I'm an outreach and recruitment specialist at the Institute of International Education. So I'm going to continue on our presentation here. So we also wanted to touch on Fulbright Scholar Liaisons. We have these on over 1,200 different campuses. And these are people who have been trained by IIE to speak to applicants, people who are interested in the program, and help you connect with your university and learn more about policies that can support you to pursue a Fulbright. So Anna is your Fulbright Scholar Liaison. I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you like to mention anything about your role real quick?
Thank you. I had meant to mention it earlier, actually, so thank you for the reminder. No, really, reach out to me, ask a question. If I don't know the answer, I will find it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Great. So yeah, usually when we're giving this presentation, it's to many different people from different institutions, but we're so happy to have Anna as a scholar liaison for you folks here at AU. So keep that in mind as you continue to consider the options. So now I'm going to dive into some of the more specifics of the scholar program.
with a very important part of it, which is the eligibility. So some of you may already know that U.S. citizenship is required for the Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program. Unfortunately, permanent residents are not eligible. There might be other Fulbright options for you, but the Scholar Program that we're talking about today is for U.S. citizens. As far as degree goes, Julie kind of touched on this. You don't have to have a terminal degree to pursue a Fulbright Scholar Award. So many people do have master's degrees or professional or artistic experience. And then many of our awards offer teaching options. So there you could do research, teaching, professional projects. So some teaching experience is typically required, but it is specified in the award. And we will be going on the website to look a little bit more closely at how the awards are laid out and how you can understand what the options are. Do we have any Fulbright Scholar alum here? I know we have two up here. Anyone in the audience? Anyone done a Fulbright? No. Okay. Well, we're happy you're here. I just also want to note that Fulbright alums are eligible to apply again as long as 2 years have passed. So if you do go on one, you could go on another one 2 years later or 20 years later. So keep that in mind. Okay, so in February, just a month ago, we actually opened our current competition for the Fulbright Scholar Program. So we are currently accepting applications. As you may have heard when you RSVP to this, the application deadline is September 15th, 2026. So there is time, but it's important to start thinking about it now. So as an overview of this year's awards, we have over 380 different awards. These are located in over 130 different countries and locations around the world. And we have a variety of different durations. So you could go for 2 months up to a year. And we also offer a short-term seminar for any international education administrators. So this slide, in addition to the stats on this year's competition, I've also laid out the different types of activities you can pursue as a Fulbright Scholar, which we've sort of alluded to already, and also the different award types, which Julie has also mentioned, and we'll dive into a little bit further. But there are opportunities to solely conduct research or solely teach. There's also opportunities for a combination of that. So maybe you're teaching 60% of the time and conducting research 40% of the time. Just for example, it's specified on the award if that is a requirement, or maybe you're suggesting your own plan, depending on what the country or countries are looking for. There's also the opportunity to pursue a professional project, maybe building curriculum or mentoring students, or working with a gallery or something like that. And then I already mentioned the seminars. And then moving to the award type, this is just another way that you can search the awards and maybe think about exploring the different options. The Scholar Awards, the first one listed, those are for pretty much anybody to look at. So if you are someone who's a little bit further along in your career, you are eligible for a Scholar Award. There's also the postdoctoral awards, which are for folks who have finished their PhD within the last 5 to 7 years of starting the award. So anyone who's recently received your PhD, that's a great place to start. There's some that are specified postdoctoral awards. The Distinguished Scholar Awards, these are the ones for people who have over seven or more years of experience in their field. They are designated as Distinguished Scholar Awards. So if you are a little bit further along and you want to explore something in that realm, you can search for the Distinguished Scholar Awards. And the last one is the International Education Administrator Awards. We won't talk about those today, but we're happy to share more information with anyone who might be interested.
Before Amy goes on with the flex options, I did want to say something about the Distinguished Scholar Awards. Always look at the Distinguished Scholar Award, because the Distinguished Scholar Award, let's say you're interested in going to Poland or whatever, and the Distinguished Scholar Award will be the award with the largest stipend in that country's catalog. So, we want for you to be comfortable when you go abroad. So always give that a look, because what they're looking for varies tremendously. Iceland has tended to be very interested in people who are more senior, have advised a lot of graduate students. They may be towards the end of their career and have the type of time to advise their students when they're there. So that's what they mean by distinguished. In Brazil, they're very interested in having people who are publishing a great deal come and engage and co-publish with their faculty. So they may be requiring that you just have tenure. So, because it might be that people are sort of at the peak of their publishing right around the time that they receive tenure. So it varies considerably. Also, for women, we looked at our data and we noticed that women were selecting out of applying for this award to a certain extent. And so it was a 40-60 split on the applications for the Distinguished Scholar Award. Then when it was awarded, it ended up more at 50-50. So women were writing very competitive applications, but they were just applying at lower rates. So there's something about that word distinguished that we can't quite figure out. There's something very gendered about it, but until we come up with a different word, we just try and point that out, that women should always take a look at those awards.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Julie. And I was just looking at my notes. There are 42 different Distinguished Scholar Awards this year. So as Julie mentioned, make sure you do check those out. So on the bottom of this slide, we also wanted to point out the flex option. So as the name suggests, this allows for more flexibility in the time that you're completing your award overseas. So it's going to be 2 to 3 non-consecutive visits over 1 to 2 years. Each award, as we keep mentioning, is different. So not all of them will offer the flex option, but you can search for the flex option. And then each country and each award has listed how that might look. So it might vary by the award. But there is some flexibility in case maybe you don't have the availability to go overseas for 6 months. I see Julie.
Yeah, it's not super flexible. Like the shortest leg that you could do would be a month, but you could do that at the Christmas break or something like that, or and then the other thing about flex, what was it? That I was trying to remember. I can't recall. Okay, move on.
Okay. If you look
I'll
at it,
remember it later.
yeah, you can add it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just at the bottom, we're kind of moving into how to select an award. So you can only select one award to apply for per cycle. So this year, applications open until September 15th. You can only submit one application. So we want to give you the tools to select the option that's the best for you and your background and your interest and fitting the award needs. So I'm going to go through this very quickly. These are just some basics because I did mention there's over 380 awards. So sometimes it can feel maybe a little daunting to start the process and figure out what you should apply for. So we've laid out a couple of pretty basic guidelines. So the first one, choose the most relevant award that best fits your goals. So you might consider thinking about some of your goals in the next couple of years if you're teaching or if you're in the middle of a research project or looking to could do more research than you normally do. Maybe that's one of your goals. Maybe that helps you narrow it down to research awards. It's really going to be personalized to you, but that's one way you could consider approaching it. As we'll look at in just a moment, you can also narrow your search by country, discipline, or award type. We've already touched on award types a bit, so you could look for those distinguished awards or a flex option or a postdoc award. And you can also search by your discipline. If you have a country that you're very interested in going to or a country you have some experience in or vice versa, you could start that way. Eligibility, we've spoken about the postdoctoral and distinguished awards, but don't count yourself out. So that's one way you can also consider approaching your search for the award. We also mentioned hidden gems. These may be a little bit less competitive options or maybe in regions that we just have less applicants sometimes. We will be hosting some webinars that will highlight some of these hidden gems, so keep an eye out for those. And then lastly, we mentioned factoring your career stage, any trends, global context, personal constraints. So understanding if you have the ability to go abroad during the time period that the award is looking for, or depending on what region you want to go to, what's going on in that region right now, any trends that you're exploring, and also taking a very close look at the individual awards because some of them do have priority areas that they're looking for. So many of them are looking for multiple disciplines or all disciplines, but they do specify also some preferred disciplines. So keeping that in mind. Did you want to add anything, Julie?
Yeah. So one of the things you'll notice is how varied the awards are. So some of them are like, basically you're picking the university. They're open to any discipline. You can create whatever project you want. Like they're very, very open. Then there are ones that are, international law at the University of Turin in Italy, very, very specific. our recommendation is don't apply. Like if you fit that University of Turin in Italy one, you're going to be very competitive for that because it's such a small pool of people who would be able to apply for it. Whereas anyone can apply for the All Disciplines Award in Italy. But what we see is this is an issue with academics is that um, they don't see themselves fitting into the description as much as we see you fitting. So a lot of times they'll be like, well, I do international law, but it's not exactly or always or what it like they have a very specific view of their research. And so they count themselves out of those more narrow awards and they think they're going to be better off applying for the all disciplines. If you can apply for one of the narrow awards, your application will be more competitive than applying for the all disciplines.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, so now I just wanted to give a little tour of the website. I know we have two Fulbright scholars here to speak, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this since we started a little late, but I'm just going to give you a tour. As you can see, this is fulbrightscholars.org. Sometimes when you Google the program or look it up, you might end up on the student website. Just make sure you're on the Fulbright Scholar page if that's what you're looking for. We have a lot of information here. There's a few different ways you can find the awards, but I'm going to start here today. So under information for, you'll go to U.S. Scholars. So these are for awards for U.S. citizens to go abroad. And then this page is going to tell you more about the program overall, kind of what we've been talking about already. You can see here, this is the U.S. Scholars Award Search. This is how I would go to the website or go to the award listing. So I'm going to click that. And then you've heard us say over 380. So you can see that there are currently 382 awards for this year. And so there's a lot to look at. Julie and I have been mentioning some of these search options. So you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a lot of different ways to start looking for the award as opposed to just scrolling through 382 awards. So I'm going to just kind of start a hypothetical search here. I'm going to do Europe and Eurasia, and I'm going to look for an award. I'm going to do award type and do research. And let's see. Okay, so we've got 103 awards that showed up. So there's still a lot. The Europe and Eurasia is one of our larger regions for awards, but I'm just going to click into one of them. Let's see here. Oh yeah, it's going to do. Let's see. I was going to do. Oh yeah, this one. Oh, the Fulbright Award for Research in Normandy. Just kind of randomly going through here. But the top of the award is going to give you all of those basics. It's the activity type. So this is a more narrow award based on they're looking for research. A PhD or terminal degree is required. The career profile, so it's open to early career academics, mid-career academics, senior academics. Up to 2 placements are available. So keep that in mind that there are more than 2, or there's sometimes more than 1 spot on each of these awards. I also want to show you the different tabs. So there's the award details, the award requirements, the award benefits, and the country and area overview. So please be sure to navigate to all of those different tabs. This page is going to give you the introduction. So why should you go to Normandy? And then the Fulbright Commission in France has, provided some of this information. And I mentioned that some of them have particular areas they're interested in. They'll list that here. And then the award requirements. So this is, citizenship. Is an invitation letter required? This one does require a letter. It also provides a resource for contacting somebody to assist you if you need assistance obtaining a letter. We also provide resources on that. This is the contact information for the IIE staff. You can also contact us. And so these are the award benefits. So this provides some overview of what kind of living expenses are provided, how travel will factor in. Do you offer dependent benefits? In this case, this one is not offering dependent benefits. But you could say have a 1-bedroom apartment, which is nice.
Yes.
Thanks for pointing that out. And then the final tab, and as you can see, you can navigate from the left-hand side and the bottom of the screen. It's going to provide a country and area overview, and this is helpful for getting an idea of where the award's located, maybe things that you'll want to be thinking about when you're doing your project statement, and all of that. So,
Go up and show Aphrodita's name and
this part.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So this is our contact information.
And then below that, you can, on each of the awards, it has the joining the office hour, the webinar,
Oh yeah.
the
No.
scholar directory, and the liaison link.
I think I hadn't even seen that. I always access it differently, so it's funny to see. Yeah, and the office hours are a great opportunity. We're scheduling a bunch of those right now. And we've been doing webinars. We've been recording them so you can access those. We've been doing regional webinars. We'll be doing some more about applying. Julie, actually, should I go to the directory? I was going to do more on the website, but I don't want to run out of time.
Answer stuff during question and answer.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would highlight is on the letters of invitation. So that's the main kind of complication in the application process. It's not required on every award. Some of them, they don't want a letter of invitation. Those that require it, you really want to get them early. So you want to start in the spring, even though our deadline is in September, because a lot of times, especially in Europe, they're gone for the summer. So you want to start that early. But then many of them have it's recommended that you get one or suggested. I forget the language, but
It's right there.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So it's, I would suggest that you get them, because what we've noticed in the committees is that you're now up against somebody who got one and then somebody who doesn't. I think it does put the application at a little bit of a disadvantage, even though they say that it's just suggested. So it doesn't rule you out, but so if you can't get it, oh well. But I would suggest trying to get it.
Yep. Yeah. So I pulled up, we have, when you view the website, as I mentioned, we have a lot of information. We have an application steps, which you can find under the apply button. And then there's a guideline on every single part of the application. I'm not going to go into the application much today because of time. But as you can see, there's a lot of information. There's a whole section on the letter of invitation and some resources on how to work through that. And as I mentioned, and Julie probably mentioned, on the website, there's also sometimes contacts that you can reach out to. So, Julie, should I? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So since we're running out of time, we will hand over because we definitely want to hear from you all. So
Thank you so much, Amy and Julie. So I'm going to introduce our faculty panelists now. So they're both Fulbright U.S. scholars in 2024-2025. So we have Molly Dondero from the Department of Sociology here at AU, who spent her year in France, and Mika Mears, I should know after all these years, is that correct? Years? Who spent a year in Brazil, and then also spent a year in Uruguay in 2009, 2010, and as I just learned, almost spent a year in Mongolia. More on that another time. But I'm going to give both of you about 10 minutes each to share kind of what your journey looked like, from first considering applying for Fulbright, then to the application process, and then to completing your Fulbright year abroad. And then also if you could share specifically what the most rewarding and the most challenging parts of your time abroad were, and then we'll open up for questions. So let's start with you, Molly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly Dondero. Thanks for coming. And as Anna said, I spent the last academic year in Marseille, France. I applied for one of these more specific awards that was geared towards people who do migration studies in any field. So I'm a sociologist and a demographer, and my main area of research is in immigration. And I came to find this award through spending lots of time in the catalog. So I thought I would start there with, the kind of things I first considered when I decided to apply for a Fulbright. In my case, I knew I had a sabbatical. I was eligible for a sabbatical, and I knew that I was interested in pursuing a new direction in my research. Most of my research is based on U.S. immigration, and I was interested in
thinking about comparative approaches to immigration. But that didn't, there was a lot of countries I could have envisioned doing this work, both in immigrant sending countries as well as immigrant receiving countries like France. And so I spent a lot of time in the late spring, early summer, going through the catalog and just figuring out what types of awards were available, what would fit my research goals best, but then also my personal considerations. So I have 2 young kids. So that also factored into how I was going through the catalog, and looking at some of these dependent supports was important as well. Um, and then, Julia, as you were mentioning that, academics like to talk themselves out, and particularly women like to talk themselves out of lots of things. I had all of these well, I shouldn't apply for this one because of this, and this, but I did have a lot of doubts, and I just wanted to kind of mention them because many of those doubts were quelled over the course of my both searching through the catalog and then also attending several of the webinars, which were very informative. And so once I found this award in Marseille, France, and decided that this was the one that I was going to that I wanted to apply for, I had some concerns. Okay, because for example, I had no previous experience working or researching in France, and so I didn't know how that would be viewed. By attending some of these webinars, it came through that Fulbright is open to people who have done work in a country before, but also very open to people who are looking to do work in a country for the first time. So it's sort of in the framing of your application. And so then it was like, okay, so a little more confident about that. Another consideration was that my work is mainly quantitative. And so it entails sitting in front of a computer and crunching numbers. And so I was, had to think about the way to frame that. Like I wasn't going to be collecting new data where that involved me being in a country. But it was really critical for me to be able to do comparative work and to contextualize my work to be in a country and get a bigger sense of this. And so again, through talking to folks at IAE, that was helpful for kind of being like another push towards applying. And then I think a final consideration was that I was proposing a new project. And I was, I wasn't sure if Fulbright gave preference to new or existing work. And my understanding of that is both. Mine was a new project that has, that this time abroad really allowed me to do a lot of the exploratory work and set up what is now it is going to be a much larger project. I got subsequent funding for it for 3 more years with the folks that I was working with in France. So all of that to say, if you are like many academics who will try to talk themselves out of applying for it, it's really worth having a conversation with the rock stars at IIE because I generally, I think Fulbright is supportive in a lot of many different directions for research, professional projects, and artistic projects. So don't count yourself out or talk yourself out of applying before you take a look. And then some recommendations this was another question that I think that you had posed about potential thinking about first steps. I think most of them, I'll just reiterate what Julie and Amy said, that, the directory, it was so inspiring to go through that and see what was out there. Attending the webinars, I attended the hidden gem ones as well, were really helpful. The website is super informative, but it really is helpful to hear it from the IIE staff. It was really informative. Contacting alumni, as soon as I figured out that this was the award I was going to apply for, I contacted a former recipient of my particular award, and within minutes he responded and was like, let's get on a call, and was so excited to talk about his experience. And then after I got the award, I contacted another alumni who had my award, and we've become really good friends. She really gave me a lot of orientation about how to navigate life in France. So yes, I think it's such a generally positive and transformative experience that most people are really happy to have the opportunity to talk about it. I think, that, at least that's the case for me. And then I would also suggest, to not be shy about contacting potential collaborators or affiliates in the host country. Um, in my case, I didn't have any collaborators in Marseille, and so it was kind of cold contacting people, but which involved a little bit of persistence. And also the timing was a little off because even though I started my search early, it was coming close to the end of the summer and France was on holiday, and so I had to kind of rudely interrupt it sometime. But it worked out in the end. And I think another kind of very concrete tip for the letter of invitation, if that's required, is what I did was I sort of said, I'll draft kind of an outline of it and you can fill it in. And they were like, oh, okay, that will be much easier for us. So and by the way, happy to share any application materials, including what that letter looked like. And let's see, some of the other questions that I'm going to pose about the process of getting support from AU was also fairly smooth. I mean, of course, it is a fellowship and not a grant, so there's no indirects for AU. But because Fulbright is, I think AU is very supportive. They recognize the prestige of it and the potential, for collaboration across countries. And so, I had a lot of support from my department, and from the college. I will say that because I had a sabbatical, logistically, it was easier to align my leave because I paired a sabbatical with a semester of research leave to do a full year. So if you can get that timing to align, I think it makes the ask easier. But I mean, there's different types of leave that one can take. And then the last piece I'll share before a little bit more about my experience was about the application process. As Julie and Amy were saying, the research proposal or the project statement is fairly standard in terms of what we're used to writing for grant proposals. It's a little bit shorter, which can make it a bit harder, I think. Writing short is, as we know from teaching students, is often is harder. But I think one thing that is unique is finding the balance of disciplinary specificity and then writing to a broad audience. Takes some thought because it will go through peer review. So you want to be able to speak, obviously, to colleagues in your discipline. But then when it goes to the in-country review, it's reviewed. It's a much broader audience that you're speaking to, so it has to be understandable and compelling to a broader audience. But then I think where I had to really put more time in, and something I wasn't used to doing in applications, were these other required essays, which are these cultural preparation essays that speak to your flexibility, adaptability, how you kind of your philosophy towards cross-cultural ambassadorship. And they're very short. And so they really took some thought. And then I served as a peer reviewer on this year's application round. And so that to me was more illuminating than going through the process of applying myself. And at the peer review stage, we were evaluating, the quality of the project, the potential outcomes and benefits, making sure the methodology was sound, with the goal of not ranking candidates, but just saying okay, this looks sound, and we feel comfortable, passing it on to the next round for in-country review. What surprised me was the extent to the which the cultural preparation essays also factored into peer review. And so that, I would say for the most part, many of the projects were sound. And so sometimes, where we saw some variation, I think, was in the cultural preparation part. And some of it maybe was that people just hadn't given enough thought, but I think it was also a reflection of we're not always used to writing in that way in proposals. So I would just highlight that as a place to really, even in your project statement, which is more about the research, think of ways that you can bring in the Fulbrightiness into the project statement. Let's see. Okay, so most rewarding and most challenging was the last. This to date for me has been one of those most rewarding professional experiences of my career, as well as one of the most rewarding personal experiences in my life. The award I had was an award that was jointly sponsored by Fulbright and the French Institute for Advanced Studies. And so it was a residential fellowship. So I actually lived on site with 13 other fellows from around the world who had funding from the French Institute for Advanced Studies. So housing was provided, which was nice. I brought my children with me and my spouse, and there was lots of other kids of other fellows there. So it was very rewarding in that sense personally. But it was, I think it has taken my research in a really different, not really different, but it expanded the direction of my research. It added kind of a new dimension to it, and in a way that is going to have a lasting impact. As I said, I'm continuing the project. And then, just the intellectual stimulation of being in a new research environment and in a university that was very interested in community engagement, seeing what that looked like in France was very rewarding. And, being on the Mediterranean was also pretty nice. But I think the challenges, I think, there were two big challenges for me, but also challenges that made it rewarding. And one, it was less about the research challenges, but more about being there with young kids was, we didn't have our systems in place like we do here, right? And so having to figure out, navigate childcare, navigate doctor's appointments, or my daughter got lice. So figuring out how to say lice in French and navigate what that looks like just like life happens, whether you're here or, abroad. And so, that sometimes took away from work, but also learning to be okay with that's okay that, it's about the research, but it's also about the personal enrichment as well. And then I think another kind of interesting challenge is, of course, being abroad during the election and the first couple of months of the new administration. And France, and particularly the university where I was, took a very strong stance against what was happening to federal funding for research and in higher education. And so, for example, the university, Aix-Marseille University, where I was affiliated, launched one of the first programs to attract U.S. scientists to France. And so the result of that, I was asked to do a lot of interviews with the French press about what was happening. I had to give testimony in front of former President Francois Hollande. And so navigating that was tricky because I didn't want to put AU or Fulbright or any of the other federal grants I had at the time in the crosshairs. And so I did a lot of that anonymously, but also felt that it was important and in line with the Fulbright mission to kind of engage in what people were wanting to know from Americans who were abroad. So, I would say the last couple of months of my grant were spent really engaged with doing that kind of work. And I gave talks on my research throughout my grant, but towards the end was invited to talk a lot about what was happening with research in the U.S. So challenging, but also I think really important. And so I'll just end and say that I'm really happy to share materials, meet for coffee, or talk about any aspect of the application process. And I encourage you to apply if you're all thinking about it.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so we don't have that much time left, so I'll be short, trying to be short and make some time for questions. So I went on 2 Fulbrights, one in a long time ago in Uruguay. I can't remember how many years ago, but and then I did a second Fulbright recently in Brazil. So just a couple of things about choosing my my program that I applied for. I first looked at the places that I found where to go, and none of them offered Fulbrights in economics. I thought it was not a good idea to get in the total pool of everybody. So I looked further. And the other thing I had is that, so my work is on gender analysis in economics. And I have to say that sadly, not all economists consider this economics. So I also wanted to look for a program where the work that I do would be, respected. And so that's something else you might think about, just like, is my research agenda a good fit for this program? And so I had kind of looked around and I was informed about what was available, but I hadn't really made a decision. And then at a big conference, I just kind of put it out there to a bunch of different people, international conference that I was meeting, that I was in this process. And I got a very nice invitation from a great person just from chatting in the hallway. So at one point I want to make in general is use your contacts, because having that letter of invitation, I think, is very important.
And so the more people you can reach out to, and have contacts, the more likely you are to find a good, letter of invitation and to find a place that's going to be a good fit for you. So that's one thing, and that the letter of invitation point connects to another point, which is I think it's important in your application and in the process to try to make everything as easy as possible for everybody, because everybody's overwhelmed, from the Fulbright people, to the people who are going to be hosting you. And so the letter of invitation makes things easier for the Fulbright people. Drafting the letter makes it easier for your host. Finding a good host for yourself makes it easier for everybody. So just have in mind that like, what can I do in my application that will make this easier for people to accept and get me invited and get me hosted and so on. Those personal essays about cross-cultural communication are another really important point. Like, remember that this is not just a prestigious research grant. This is kind of a person-to-person project also. And so you have to convince people not only is your project a very worthy research project, but also that you're going to contribute to this person-to-person connection, in the scholarly field. So you want your application to be clear, like what's in it for the host institution? What are they going to get from this? And also, what's my institution going to get from this when I come home, and maybe my broader community or my research community in the United States or whatever. You want to make clear like how this benefits somebody besides you and your CV. And then maybe just skipping quickly to the while you're there part. So everybody's really busy. So it's kind of on you to make contacts in the place you're going. You're not going to have a necessary, sort of you alluded to this too, like a contact base. And so that's again where reaching out to all your contacts. Who do you know in the country I'm going to? What can I meet with them about? And so on is helpful. And make cold calls if you want and whatever. I applied for a regional travel grant, which allowed me to also travel outside of Brazil to go to Colombia, give talks there. So there are additional opportunities for travel that are funded by Fulbright. And then I guess the last point I'll make is back to that people part a little bit. Remember that part of Senator Fulbright's idea was to make Americans less parochial. And so part of your job while you're there is to learn about the place you are. So don't feel bad, take off an hour in the afternoon and go to the museums or whatever. So I worked really hard. I got 7 papers out while I was on my Fulbright in Brazil. But like every afternoon at 4:00, I would close my computer and rush off to a museum. And so I think that just having that in mind too, that you should really, it's part of your Fulbright to take advantage of those other kinds of opportunities outside your lab or your computer.
Big.
So we have a little bit of time for questions. So we have 10 minutes actually. And the first one goes to actually the other co-sponsor of this event, Tashina Girard. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm the Director of International Partnerships and Strategic Initiatives. I just have to say, I really appreciate Mika because you can see she knows how to use the resources at her disposition, but she also contacted me saying, hey, these are the countries I'm going to. This is where I'm traveling. Do we have any partners that I can go visit? Which she did. And when we spoke to the faculty there and some students who hopefully will be interested in coming to AU. And I really appreciate any Fulbrighter who decides to connect to that. Amazing. We have a partner in Marseille. I happen to have moved here from Marseille 3 years ago. If I had known you're going there, I have so many friends at Aix-Marseille. I would have been able to help you that flipou for your hair. Like, I would have, like, that's another shout out saying we have a lot of international community at AU. So if you do get one of these grants, if you come and talk to us, we can help you connect to maybe a person who lived 15 years in Marseille before coming here. But now I have to know all your stories. We're going to have to finish. But just to say, you going for AU is really beneficial, especially if it's on a topic that we're building partnerships out with. And maybe you will be the reason we build a partnership out with wherever you're going. So that's what I wanted to say.
So, can you take the microphone? Sorry.
Another reason to contact Tashina's office is because so the short answers, when you're talking about what the benefits are going to be for your community or whatever, you could be saying our university is exploring partnerships in this area, and I've been asked to and it's just you personally those contacts.
Any questions from any potential future Fulbrighters? Does anyone feel Fulbrightable? Is that the word we heard earlier today? What's your word? Fulbrighty? Question.
Thank you for the great panel discussion. This probably will apply only to me. I just became eligible, just became U.S. citizen last year. Would you recommend that I wait a few years, until I start applying? Because it's just
No, we're very interested in having naturalized citizens apply for the program. So I wouldn't feel like that's any type of barrier for you. So
Oh, okay. I have two quick questions. One, does language help? I'm surprised nothing came up about speaking the language in the country where you're going, so I'm curious about that in your application process. And then my second question is, I noticed on the website, and I can dig deep myself a little bit later, that I was always under the impression that a university would be your host, but I saw something in there about a nonprofit organization, so I'm curious about that because I do a lot of community-based work. Yes, this is a great question. So first, the language question. Yeah, we didn't touch on that. But as we mentioned, all of the awards are different. Many of the awards are able to be completed. English is sufficient, I think, is the language that we have. It really depends. Some of them will require intermediate Spanish, for example, depending on where, or another language. That we didn't get to all of the application materials, but it will be specified under the award requirements if there is a language requirement. And then there's also instructions on a language evaluation to complete that would be part of the application. So I will say there are plenty of places you can go where English is sufficient, where maybe you might not necessarily think that you could go there, but that is definitely an option. So there's more on the awards, and we do value language skills. So that's something you could talk about in some of these essays if you have them, or if you don't have them, you can talk. Exactly. Would you add on that point? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, yes. And so many of the awards will be partnered with institutions, but as you notice, not all of them do. And some of them do have a lot of flexibility. So it might be a nonprofit, NGO, a gallery, an institution. So I'm not too familiar with how many, if there's NGOs. Yeah, it's definitely not exclusively with an institution, and sometimes those letters of invitation, it's also it's not exclusively from an institution or a university. It could be from the nonprofit or NGO or gallery or museum. So there's definitely a lot of different ways to approach the award. It's not solely at the institution.
So on the language, one aspect of language that you do have to take into consideration that would be similar to any grant application would be viability of the project. So if you are going out in the field and doing a survey, for example, like how are you going to deal with that language barrier? So you would have to, some people get graduate students from the host university, but you'd have to address that in order to breach the viability hurdle in the review process.
Would you mind grabbing the microphone, or was there another question?
So, I'm just going to say, if you don't know anybody at the institution that you find the Fulbright you can also come to me, because we might have a partnership that you don't know about, and we might have contacts that you don't have. And if we don't, we can help you get them. That's also part of it. What we can do to help you establish it. If there really is an award that is perfect for you, but you don't actually know somebody at the place, please come to us. We can help you networking.
Right.
Instead, two quick things. So on the language question, I think one other thing, I mean, you're the Fulbright people, but I think one other thing Fulbright has to worry about is, you're failing on a personal level, right? Like needing to come home or whatever. And so I think if you speak any of the language at all, it's useful to say that, or if you're willing to take a class between now and then, So I had studied Portuguese back when I was an undergraduate. I'm 66 years old. That was a really long time ago. It wasn't that useful, but I pointed to that and I said, I did refresh that, afterward. And so I think that's
on the language issue, just even having a little is better than just not responding to that part of, And the other thing I wanted to say is that on my first Fulbright in Uruguay, I didn't initially get the Fulbright. And I think the reason was that I didn't make it Fulbrighty enough. And I just talked about my project, without talking about the benefits to AU or to my institution I was going to. But I got the no and a little letter back saying, oh, that's really too bad to hear. But, I'm on sabbatical anyway. So if somebody drops out at the last minute, I'm still interested and I could go on short notice. Until I was invited. And so, or whatever, receive the award. So I think, being flexible can also be helpful. And just this point is how far ahead you have to apply. If you have a spring sabbatical coming up, notice the deadline is September the year before, like a year and a half before you're going to go. And so there was one sabbatical where I just missed the possibly imagine it was that far in advance. So that's you face ahead. It takes a long time to get all the little pieces of paper together and get it done. So definitely plan ahead.
I was just going to add, because we might have said this, but maybe not. So the awards that are due, the applications due September 15th, that would be for travel starting in fall 2027, spring 2028. So just reiterating that.
And another question first.
Yeah, it's just a quick one. You referenced hidden gems in terms of, the projects, but I wonder, how these, awards are distributed geographically also. Like, are there patterns? I would imagine there are some like really attractive places that people want to go, and you see a large number of applications for those countries. Is there also hidden gem countries that you would like to see more traffic, but doesn't come?
It's not that we would like to see it. It's just like Romania. Everybody has a fabulous time. It's a great commission. And so, that's not a country that people necessarily think about, but it's everybody and like multiple disciplines are having a fabulous time in Romania. So it's not like when we find we're not getting enough traffic on Romania or we're not getting enough applicants, then we might be emphasizing that. Or our colleague Aphrodite from Kosovo. So she's going to tell you all about how fabulous Kosovo is if you're on one of the European webinars. And it's true, like the embassy there is very dedicated to the Fulbright program and really supports people. In other places, maybe they have a lot of Fulbrighters and there isn't as much contact. But sometimes we know about there is that commission is really active in supporting its Fulbrighters, and you should consider it. So Morocco has a relationship with Spain where they have a joint seminars, where they bring all their alumni together and you are presenting to all the alumni from the program. It's that they bring the Fulbrighters from both countries together. Italy has something very special. We don't have a problem with applications to Italy or Spain, but Morocco sometimes. So Italy has something where they bring in all their alumni and you're presenting to all their alumni. So we know little things that you're not necessarily seeing on the awards that make a country special, and we can talk about that. But we have some awards that we understand why they're not receiving a lot of applications, and those are not the ones that we highlight in hidden gems necessarily. Like cybersecurity in Democratic Republic of Congo is going to be very difficult to fill when people are leaving a junior college, but able to make $100,000 a year in cybersecurity. It's very hard for us to fill that award, but it's not going to be one we would highlight in hidden gems because we know why we're not getting a lot of traffic.
Okay.
So I know we're slightly over time. I'm just going to make one more point connected to what Tashina mentioned earlier. So we do have a large community of international faculty and staff here at AU, including myself and Tashina. So It's the International Faculty and Staff Community Group. We have over 150 members from I don't know how many countries. So if you're thinking about applying for a specific country, you're unsure, you want to know a little more, reach out and we can pair you up, connect you with somebody from that country. If you have won a Fulbright and want to know all the details about how to open a bank account, actually that's what I helped Naomi Baron with back in 2010, how to open a bank account in Sweden and then how to close it 4 years later. But there's so many reasons why this group, is here to help. Also, we want to connect with you. So thank you all for coming, and thanks first and foremost to all of our panelists for being here. Thank you.